Hey, and welcome back to the 25 Days of Christmas. Today we are just going to go over some tips on whether or not to depot. So depot or not. Here's my tips. Let's get started. First tip is, and this will go, in order of probably importance, is to determine whether the pans are magnetic or not. And what I mean by that is taking a magnet and just checking to see. So we'll go ahead and look at this one first. And you'll hover your magnet over your shadow. If there's any like suction or force field, magnetic force field, you'll feel it when you're placing your magnet down. And I always tell my community to just stick it on that corner so that that magnet catches right there. This is not magnetic. So if it is not magnetic, then you have a decision to make. Do you want to possibly depot and then repan this? I mean, this is a $3 elf shadow, and what would you put this in? You'd have to put this in an empty magnetic palette. Probably not going to be this size. It's going to be larger. So this is a great example of something that I would not depot, just because it would be a hassle. It's going to cost quite a bit of money to depot, because not only do I have to have some pans, but I also have to have a home for those pans. And these pans, even though they're relatively affordable, when you start depotting, 20, 30, 40, 50 shadows, it becomes quite costly very quickly. So I just always recommend to check first to see if the pans are magnetic. Secondly, you also want to check to see if the palette plastic or if it's cardboard. If it's cardboard, you've got a couple different options. You can depot, you can, but it kind of becomes cumbersome at that point. So here's an example of, we'll just show you. This is the Lorac Pro palette, and I'm going to place my magnet in there, and you can see it sticks to it. Oh, and it just ripped out some of that shadow. Dang it. These shadows have some iron oxides in them that are actually magnetic, so yeah, just be careful when you do that. But anyways, it is magnetic. Now, this is a cardboard pan, so you have to assess whether or not you're willing to scar up those corners when you lift up those pans. I like to depot palettes, but I have, and you'll see in one of the previous 25 Days of Christmas videos, I depotted my Mimosa palette, and it didn't go quite as planned. So here's an example of depotting without destroying. This fell. That's the only reason why that got destroyed. It did not get destroyed in the actual depotting. But this is a great example of this right here. These little corners are kind of scarred just slightly because this is cardboard packaging. And even though I heated up the palette to detach the adhesive, it's still, you have to kind of get in there and wedge the shadow out. So unfortunately, that's a factor you'll have to weigh out. I was going to depot this bad boy right here because these 24 shadows are actually what is in the Sultry Nights and Tropical Days Physician's Formula. But I will tell you, upon further investigation, they're not magnetic pans, okay? So then you're looking at doing a possible refrigerator method. I will say I did go ahead and just try to depot just to see if I was able to do it without hurting anything. And I will say I scarred a little bit of this corner right here. I don't know if you can see it or not. Yeah, I scarred a little bit of that corner. And then I had to refrigerator method this, which means basically you think of your palette as your refrigerator, and this is your shadow magnet that's going to stick to it. Whereas most of the time, your pan is magnetic, and then it sticks to a sheet of magnet. Then you can actually take a magnet to lift it out. Here, I mean, it sticks to this side, but I can't actually bring it out from the top with my magnet. So then you're weighing out the assessment of whether or not you really want to, like, every single time you get in here and dig out these shadows, or whether you want, I mean, I guess I could put these in a magnetic pan. So it would be another pan that it would be in. So that would not be a, you know, depot without destroying situation. So I changed my mind on this. Won't depot without destroying, but I initially wanted to so that I could have all 24 of these, and then I could put together my version of a Sultry Nights or Tropical Days or whatever you call it. I think this is called, yeah, this is a Sultry Nights palette. And these shadows are found within here, kind of mishmashed, and they're marked. I don't know if you can see them or not, but I just did a little marking. Okay, moving on. So we're not going to depot without destroying that palette. All right, these are not magnetic. These are not magnetic pans. They do feel like they have a little magnet. I do feel something. And I thought I had seen somebody's video where they did depot their, you know, Physician's Formula. So here's another thing that you want to pay attention to is, can you depot without destroying? So we went over, dang, I'm just like scarring up everything. What actually did that this time? I think it was this one, wasn't it? It was this, and it, yeah, there it is. Right there. There's the rest of my black. Good thing it's a black shadow because I really don't care too much for black. I love black clothes. I don't like anything else black. Anyways, so there we go. I should have wrote these down. I can't remember. But anyways, there you have it. Another thing to consider would be just to make your own empty magnetic sheet. So like this palette, oops, I'm just going to destroy every single one of these palettes. I can't believe I did that. That sucks. Anyways. And I say that about square pans because those are the hardest for me to repress. And like every single one of these is square. That's weird. Anyway, so here I have an example of something that I might just take out the entire sheet, because you can actually take and pop this little thing out. This whole tray just comes right out. Just like this. Very easily. Oops. Come on, sweet pea. I'm not trying to hurt you. I mean you no harm. Now we're like at an angle, so I don't know if I can do it without damaging stuff. I mean you no harm. Oh boy. Anyways, you can pop this out. So this is just a separate little tray. Maybe you can't. And I don't know why it's not coming out. Anyways, I don't really want to break it, but I know you can pop this tray out. I've heard that you can. And then you could use this actual palette, lay a magnetic adhesive sheet down, and then you have an empty magnetic palette to use. So let's say like none of these shadows work for you, or you're allergic to the fragrance in these, you know, eyeshadows, so you have to get rid of them and you can't keep them. You give that little tray to a friend. You slip your magnetic adhesive backing in here, and now I wish I could just get it out and just demonstrate this for you. Like, there we go. There she comes. There she comes. That's a girl. All right. So you see, like, let's say I'm allergic to all these shadows. I'm not, but let's just say that I am for intents and purposes. I can take this, lay a magnetic adhesive sheet in here. And then I've got a see-through empty magnetic palette that I can use. I need to cut this off in the worst way. So that's something else to consider, that maybe, you know, putting all your efforts into something like this isn't really worth it. It might just be worth it to keep this, you know. That's another option. So we're going to pop this puppy back in. I do like this palette. I do use it frequently, so we'll just go ahead and set it aside. These are not hard rules, but soft rules, because here's an example of a palette that is cardboard. The pans are magnetic, as you've seen, I demonstrated earlier. However, I will depot this in the next video that you guys will see, so stay tuned. If you're not already subscribed, you need to be subscribed, because I'll show you guys how to depot this without destroying it. And what's really cool about this is that this is the Lorac Pro. I think it's the third one. It is actually the same size pans as the Fairy Tale Forest, the Soleil, and the Noir. And what's really awesome is that these pop out and you make these removable, and then all of these eyeshadow palettes are now interchangeable. So now you've got Lorac being able to be, you know, I can take some of these shadows out. Let's say I don't like any of the mattes, or I want a matte black. I can take this matte and put it in here and take this and swap it out if I wanted to. I would suggest labeling these on the back with some sort of labeling system, and I have a video on that, this 25 Days of Christmas. So I will, if it's not already up, ready to load and play, it will be shortly. Again, you know the drill. Subscribe. So these are the same size. So sometimes it pays to outweigh some of those things. You know, this is like measurements, and then you can see there. And let's say that like my skin's pretty fair, so I would switch this out with one of these three, and then I would have something that's a little more curated for me. Or maybe even putting that snow shade in there might be a little bit better for me than having all three of these midtones. So you can mix and match once you've depotted without destroying. I did a little investigation into this palette. What's really neat about this is that I've popped one of the pans out already. Yeah, and I've kind of nicked up the shadow, but you know, just so you know, you don't have to be like that. I'm just kind of rough with them. Anyways, I don't know what keeps happening there. Like, am I opening it up and then it's just, and I'm scratching it? I don't know. Anyways, this right here underneath is actually kind of like a soft velvety plastic mat. It's not, I mean, there's cardboard, but this up here is actually kind of like a plastic coated cardboard, therefore making it easier. Like you can see, I got in there. It did scar it just ever so slightly, but for the most part, I'm going to be able to keep this intact. And this was without any heat being placed on it. So ideally, you place a little heat on this puppy and you'll be able to just pop these pans right out of the palette. And you have got yourself another, what? 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16 shades that can go into your Lorac Pro palettes that are already removable. So that's an option. And that is a risk I'm willing to take. I'm willing to go ahead and depot with slightly, you know, scarring these up so that I can mix and match within my other Lorac palettes. So it's not always that when you see like, oh, this palette right here, it's cardboard, I'm not going to depot it. That's not always the end all be all. Then you want to check and make sure that, you know, the pans are magnetic. I would say if the pans are not magnetic, that's like a 90% chance I'm not going to depot it, because a lot of times what ends up happening is I put together the palette in a, what I call the refrigerator method, meaning that it's opposite of this. It's that the pan has the magnet on it, and the sheet that the crate that it lays in, or the palette that it lays in, is actually what's metal. So that's like your refrigerator. So it's kind of like your eyeshadow is the magnet sticking into that. And you really want to try to avoid that if you can, because you can't really remove the shadows and then use them in other palettes. I mean, you can, they actually do respond to other magnetic palettes because they both have poles. But they don't stick as well, and it just doesn't really fare as well as, you know, a pan that's already responsive to magnetics. Another thing to consider is the cost in which you paid for the palette. You are paying for the price of packaging. I know this comes in BoxyCharm, so it was relatively affordable. I know that it's been on sale for half price for like basically years at this point, but still something to note about having a palette like this in your collection and then trying to depot it. This packaging, like many other good quality packagings, you could take and remove this tray, but it would be very difficult, and probably not without scarring a little bit of this plastic. Another thing to consider is this type of plastic right here has absolutely no give in it. So you are going to dent your pans, and you've got a shimmer, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. You've got 9 mattes and what, half a dozen shimmers, something like that. I don't know. 3, 6, 8 shimmers, 9. So it's a half and half. At this point, it'd be kind of a wash, but I'm going to say no, don't depot something like this, because this packaging is pretty sturdy. It travels well. It has a mirror. You paid for this packaging in some way, shape, or form. So you don't, I mean, depotting something like this isn't really going to benefit you unless you just absolutely, like, let's say I'm a neutral lover. I can't have anything else. I can't stand to look at these shades. I don't want them in my palette, you know, then you might go ahead and remove these, but understand you'll probably destroy some palettes or you'll destroy part of the palette. You'll definitely probably at the very minimum scar up some of these shadows. So that's another thing to consider. Also, so we have a palette here and it's got that soft velvet matte like I was telling you about with the Lorac Pro. The pans are responsive, so it is magnetic. So this ideally, you know, would be a depot without destroying project, right? Wrong. There is only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 shimmers. The rest are mattes. This is what is considered a matte. Well, there's 7, whatever. Anyways, you understand my drift. It's a matte heavy palette. Anytime you're depotting a matte, you run the risk of damaging not only the pans, but the actual shadows themselves. Not saying that you can't repress these shadows, but these are square and I don't have anything to repress square pans, at least not in a very aesthetically pleasing way. So this is not going to be a depotting project because mattes are hard to depot. This would probably scar up even just minimally, and you really can't even squeeze like a pin in there. Plus, again, like I said, this is a pretty friendly, you know, it stacks well, it travels well, it's not bothering anybody to have this like this. So unless you would need the shadows as singles in your collection, I would highly suggest not depotting matte heavy palettes because you'll probably run the risk of getting some scarring and possibly damaging or losing a lot of shadow. Okay, so what about something like this? So we've got our little checks here. Up, magnetic. Okay, it's plastic. You can easily get something in between the pans and the crate or the tray that which it is in. So it might be. This is a 50-50. It's a really nice packaging and you've paid a lot for this packaging. So I'm not personally going to depot it. I have taken one shadow out and removed it for a video purpose, but as a whole, I wasn't planning on depotting any of these. They're just nicely glued in there. If you popped them out with just force, you do have quite a few mattes that you're possibly going to run the risk of denting the pans, and not only denting the pans, but scarring up the shadows. And then when you heat something like this, that's really going to be difficult to get enough heat into this tin, into this plastic, and onto the adhesive portion. So that's something that you have to weigh as well, and that's something that I look for. Now, this is, again, another scenario where popping this tray out might be your best option, and then putting a magnetic sheet adhesive in there. You can now use the pan, the case as an empty magnetic palette. And then potentially, I don't know what this looks like underneath. I've never actually popped the tray out, but you could potentially place this on your Z-Potter or your glass range top stove, low heat, do the works, and you could probably, you know, dismantle and pop some of these shadows out. So, I mean, you could go that route, and that would probably be a safe. This is a 50-50. I'm not going to depot it because I don't have any reason to. I'm not going to use these as singles. Too Faced doesn't sell any of these as singles, so I don't have any reason to depot these. But if you were going to depot them, that would be I mean, it's 50-50. It's really just, at that point, personal preference, because you've got everything lined up for you. They'd be good to go. You probably wouldn't have too many problems or issues, but, you know, it's always work. It's always time. And then also where are you gonna store? Well, I guess you don't have to really worry about storing any of them because you're depotting without destroying, so you're gonna put them right back in there. Okay, here's a great example of depotting without destroying. And, you know, plastic, the pans are magnetic and they come right out of the bottom. The reason that I wouldn't depot something like this is this right here is a very unusual, I mean, I've already depotted it, but one reason you may not want to consider depotting is I don't think these right here, yeah, they're 22 inches or 22 millimeters. So they are the same distance as a ColourPop shadow, so I think they're the same pan size. So I mean, relatively could trade out some ColourPop singles, but other than that, what are you gonna do with it? I mean, I use some of these as singles in a Huda Beauty duping the vibes, but these would just be, you know, like, this is a small enough container basically. Oops. You probably wouldn't need to really depot it. A lot of times I think about depotting something like with 16 shadows because it's cumbersome, it's hard to see and hard to, you know, get around this color story, and I just want to use like this shade, and this shade, and the rest of this actually doesn't really fall into what I, you know, the color story that I'm going for. So these, taking and removing these 3 shadows is ideal for something that I would be, you know, putting together. That's the reason why I chose to depot this one, because I liked these 4 are actually on display back there, but these 2 right here are actually sparkler shadows, and I wanted to be able to use them, you know, as singles, because I have a feeling there's going to be some, that's just a really good formulation for such an affordable palette. So that's why I did it. I don't know that I would go back and do it again though. I don't know that I would, because this broke, but that was because I was transporting it from upstairs to downstairs, and I was taking entirely too many things down at one time, and this is what fell on the floor, and it busted a bunch of these shadows. So, but, and the rest are on display. Anyways, those are some tips. Oh, last one. Whether to depot the mini Natasha Denonas or not. Oh boy. Okay. So, these are seemingly the same size as the Lorac Pro. So you see where I'm coming, you see where I'm going with this. This would be awesome if you could depot these without destroying, of course, and be able to mix and match your own eyeshadow custom, like Natasha Denona eyeshadow palette from some of the Lorac Pro palettes. Folks, I gotta warn you, this is plastic, which I said it would be better to be plastic. However, this would be melted by the time these would be warm enough to pop out of the pan. And also look at these shadows. They're in there like not even a can opener could get them out. So not only are you running the risk of melting and possibly ruining this cute little eyeshadow, you know, palette case, but you're also looking to ruin some of these shadows, because I just don't know how you would get anything in there. I'll go ahead and give it a go. This is the Love palette, so I don't mind if I scar up one of these shades. But, you know, here's the thing. You try and get into this, and I wouldn't even be able to stick a needle with some floss in there and then just cut it across and try to depot it that way. I don't think that would work. I mean, I can try. I'm willing to risk my $12 Love palette for that reason. But here's the other thing. If you only have Natasha Denona and you don't have any Lorac, I would say don't depot your Natasha Denonas, because I just don't think that, like, for example, I wouldn't mix and match any of my Love. The only 2 that I own are this one and the mini gold, and pinks and purples don't really mix with the green and gold. I wouldn't mix them anyways. So I don't have any reason to mix and match across the brand. I do have a reason to mix and match across, you know, other brands that have the same size of pans. But I did measure, and they are the exact same size as the Lorac. Lorac Pro palette eyeshadows would fit in this, which I mean, I would love to be able to depot this. I just don't think I could do it without destroying either the shadows or the pan. So unfortunately, it's gonna have to be a no from me, dog. A no. Yeah, so sometimes when thinking about it, plastic sometimes isn't gonna be, you know, your best friend. Like, I say it's easier to depot a plastic than it is a cardboard, but you do have to weigh some options out. Like this right here, I would, if I was actually like dead set on depotting this, I would go ahead and scuff up this tray and then pop this out. And perhaps you could just, I don't know, I've never tried. But this tray is just sitting in here in this packaging like this. And then you would just, you know, pop it out. But I would definitely not try to like put the heat to this puppy and then just heat all the way through to those pans, because by the time you got the pans warm enough that they would pop out, you would then be like on level 9 of the you know, plastic melting. So you've destroyed, okay? You can't depot without destroying, in my opinion. Are these the same size? No, these are a little bigger. I can see that just by looking. Can you see that just by looking? Oops. It's okay, that's a putty shadow. What size is it though? Looks like it's approximately 20. And the Natasha Denonas alongside the Loracs, I think, are about 17 or 18, I think it is. Yeah, about 18, something like that. I've got this puppy right here. Oh man, like I'm just going at it today, folks. I need to be a little more cautious. I don't worry too much about these. These are okay. It was about 17 and a half. And then the Natasha Denona. So Lorac would go into Natasha, Natasha would not go into Lorac. So I mean, you know, there's that. There you have it. Those are some tips that I have to consider when I am thinking of depotting an eyeshadow palette without destroying. So basically meaning I want to reuse the packaging, but I also want the pans of eyeshadow removable. Those are some options. Thanks so much for joining me, guys. Also, make sure that you guys give this a thumbs up so that I know that you like this kind of content. You want to see some more of it and such. Can't wait to see you guys in my next episode. Bye!